Watch this.
Putting a neutral policy in place implies there's room for people on either side of the table. But in the West Ada School District, they're considering a neutral policy that may be leaving some LGBTQ students without support and a seat at that table. Neutral is certainly not the stance a Boise Baptist pastor is taking when it comes to our LGBTQ community, telling his church queer people deserve death. Hateful? Sure. But a hate crime? Hate crimes were most certainly stopped this past weekend in Coeur d'Alene with the arrest of 31 members of a white nationalist group at a pride event. But that didn't stop the conspiracy theorists from spreading their misinformation about it. So back in May, the West Ada School District Board of Trustees decided they'd put a limit on what a teacher can put in their classroom. Policy 401.2 would ban things like banners, bumper stickers, even books, flags. Well, after that plan was introduced, as you can imagine, there was a bit of a pushback, specifically from a lot of teachers and members of the West Ada Education Association. So now district is beginning to hear revisions to that potential policy. And Katya joins us now, and you caught up with the president of that association. What did he have to say about this policy and the way it's working right now?
Well, this is the first draft, so they want to make several revisions before it actually gets approved. And there were several concerns from teachers about two specific updates to this policy. I want to get right into those. He said there was a lot of concerns, first, about this proposed change to common surveys given to students. Now, at the beginning of the year, there are a lot of surveys given to new students. The new policy says, in quote, staff shall not make inquiry of students that pertains to the student's religion, religious beliefs, political affiliations, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, race, color, national origin. Also, nothing that pertains to the student's medical history or medical status. The list goes on. Now, the second big change was that staff shall not use school property, including classroom, conference room, or office desk area to hang, post, erect, or display any posters or images that supports or opposes political, quasi-political, or controversial topics. Now, they defined a controversial topic as one that an educator, quote, reasonably understands to have students on more than one side of an issue. Here's what Zach Borman, president of the West Ada Education Association, says about this particular draft.
A teacher often does a survey of the students to get to know them and nicknames and things about them that might help you find ways to connect with the kid. There was a big push, or a lot of teachers gave surveys this year and asked for pronouns and stuff, preferred pronouns, and there was a big uproar at that point. The intent appears to be that teachers just can't ask specific questions regarding a kid's sexual identity, orientation, that sort of thing, and that they're attempting to make the classroom as neutral as possible by not allowing political or quasi-political materials to be displayed in the classroom that isn't directly related to curriculum. For me, it's hard to say that the classroom is going to be a neutral environment, because humans are not neutral. Like, what is personal and what is political it mucks it up a lot, I think. And it could potentially lead to just a further kind of chilling effect of teachers being afraid to talk about things or to be themselves in the classroom, unless the district is going to legislate and say, like, hey, you can't put green next to blue, next to yellow, next to red on any sign in your classroom or whatnot, which is absurd to do. They can't. It's just not gonna solve it in the way that they think it's going to. To be neutral, in a sense, is almost to kind of like hurt these kids, to pretend, because to say that it is divisive, you can't put a pride flag in your classroom because it's divisive, is to basically say that, well, some people don't believe that you have the right to exist and be you, and therefore, we can't have that in your classroom, but that doesn't mean that the kid just goes away.
It definitely doesn't. And I do want to reiterate that this was draft 1, and the board has to approve 3 readings of this specific policy in order to give it the green light. They will probably go back, redraft stuff. It'll happen on Monday, and then they will present it to the board in July.
That definition of controversy is interesting with students on more than one side of any topic. So everybody has to agree on everything at all times. Discussing history, even English, even interpreting a book, you have to agree on everything. That other thing, nicknames. You know, if you have somebody who goes by middle name, how they get teachers to know that? What about peanut allergies? If you have to ask if there's a peanut allergy, you're not allowed to ask about that either.
Yeah, that certainly seems like the path that we're going down, and we're talking about who is all on one side.
Right.
And then what do you teach at all?
It's going to be tough, right?
Yeah.
Well, still a lot of discussion to be left with this policy.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Katya.
Yeah.
All right, sticking with this theme of controversial language and brands, earlier this week, we shared a snippet of a sermon delivered by a Boise Baptist pastor that used the Bible to say LGBTQ plus people should be put to death. Pastor Joe Jones of the Shield of Faith Baptist Church spent a lot of time in the Old Testament to tell his congregation why God wants this to happen, including dipping more than a toe into the reptilian theory of lizard overlords controlling our government. Stick with me. That's the conspiracy theory that ancient aliens, taking the form of bloodthirsty reptilians, came to Earth long ago, and they've been mating with humans ever since, manipulating our DNA, all in an effort to gain control of the world by getting themselves into positions of power, you know, like presidencies, royalty, places of entertainment, that kind of stuff. Well, Pastor Jones doesn't quite go all in on that alien part, but he did lean into the biblical explanation of a reptilian, using Old Testament chapters and verse to describe reptilians as someone who has rejected the truth of God, and God has said, I'm done with you.
So what is the hallmark of a reptilian? Somebody who does not like to retain God in their knowledge, okay? Now here's the thing. I'm not saying that every reptilian is a sodomite, but all sodomites are reptilians. Now, if the system was working properly, okay, it would be like a funnel process, okay? God gives these people up, they expose themselves, they manifest themselves, okay? And we find out who they are, we report them to the authorities, and they send them down the chute to hell, okay? That's how it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, they get promoted at your jobs, they want to take your kids, they want to take everything that you have, including your soul. Let me tell you something, pal. It's your fault that these pedophiles are around. It's not God's fault. He told nations how to deal with that. He told the government of his own nation, the nation that he ruled, put them to death. Put all queers to death. They die. And you know what? When they die, that stops the pedophilia. Okay? It's a very, very simple process.
Plus of all, homosexuality, not even close to the same thing as pedophilia. But it's those last two takes, the funnel process of identifying members of the LGBTQ plus community and having government authorities send them down the chute to hell by putting them all to death. That's how it's supposed to work, he said. Well, that led to Jess in Caldwell to ask us this after we shared that video on Monday. Couldn't the Baptist pastor who spoke be arrested for a hate crime or discrimination? Says Jessa in Caldwell. So we asked this question of the Boise Police Department, and they said likely no, because what the pastor said is considered too vague to be considered threatening. BPD brought up Idaho Code 187902 and saying there is a difference between hateful speech and a hate crime. That law says it shall be unlawful for any person maliciously and with specific intent to intimidate or harass another person because of that person's race, color, religion, ancestry, or national origin, to cause injury to another person or damage to property. That's all outlawed. But more specifically, one cannot threaten to do those things if there is a reasonable cause to believe that any of those threats will actually be followed through. Then it is a crime. And BPD says generally for that to happen, for there to be a reason to believe those threats will become a reality, well, those threats need to be directed at an individual. So as of right now, Jessa, no. Pastor Joe Jones will not be arrested for a hate crime or charged with any sort of discrimination. While BPD says what the pastor said during that May 11th sermon doesn't meet that criteria, they did admit they do see those hateful or those comments as hateful and harmful to our community, and they do not condone it. They said any form of hateful speech, whether verbal, written, or symbolic against the LGBTQ plus community is inconsistent with the city's mission of creating a city for everyone. Boise Police Department will always work to protect someone regardless of their race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, or sexual orientation, and gender identity. Those last words not included in Idaho law, by the way. We tried to speak with Pastor Jones today, but he told us he wasn't available. Maybe he might sit down with us later this week, he said. Well, earlier this week, the Interfaith Equality Coalition, which is a group of more than 24 clergy from Christian churches and synagogues all across the Treasure Valley, well, they sent out a letter condemning the hateful rhetoric of Pastor Jones. Also quoting Bible verses that contradict what he said, they wrote, "What we say matters, and how we say it matters too. Dehumanizing language is reprehensible," the letter said, "and to do so in the language of God and faith is abhorrent, false, and blasphemous." All right, well, some of you may still be thinking about that reptilian theory I mentioned because maybe you've never even heard anything about it and can't think of anything so ridiculous. Or maybe you have heard a little bit about it, just don't believe it, but are aware that some do. Like more than 13 million Americans actually believe it to be true, according to polling research, that ancient alien lizard people are merging with humans to change our DNA and take over the world. It's a conspiracy theory that began in the early 2000s. Conspiracy theories are something we've heard a lot about as recently as this past weekend, but especially over these last couple of years. As this past weekend is concerned, it pertains to that Pride in the Park event in Coeur d'Alene. You've likely heard how that U-Haul van full of 31 Patriot Front members, a white nationalist hate group, there to start a riot with Pride attendees, well, they were actually Antifa members, right? There to make conservatives look bad. A theory perpetuated that afternoon as it was happening by Matt Shea, a former Washington state legislator who was kicked out of that state's Republican caucus because of his ties to extremism, and an investigation that found he engaged in domestic terrorism. Remember the armed takeover of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Oregon in 2016? Yeah, he helped plan that. And he has recruited armed militia members to go against federal agents. That kind of stuff as well. So here's what he said on social media at 3:44 in the afternoon as these arrests were happening Saturday.
Hey everybody, it's Matt Shea broadcasting live from McCune Park in downtown Coeur d'Alene. Just a few minutes ago as we were on our prayer walk, it looks like Antifa may have been setting an ambush for us. A U-Haul truck, looks like a large 20-foot U-Haul truck, was busted just after we walked past with our prayer march. Inside were over a dozen by my count, maybe even 24 men in white face masks with khaki pants on, very similar to those who were getting in a van in D.C. January 6th and were filmed doing that. Looks like they were busted here in North Idaho, and this attempted ambush by Antifa was thwarted.
His reference to khaki pant-clad dudes getting into a similar U-Haul van in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021, that was actually members of Patriot Front, not Antifa. And it was on December 4th, 2021, not January 6th. And yeah, there's video of them getting into a van, a similar van. Oh, by the way, an ambush by Antifa? As reported by the Spokesman Review yesterday, Matt Shea claimed U-Haul and CDA was filled with Antifa, but among those arrested was a man who attended Shea's church. There you go, but don't let the facts get in the way there. And don't take my word for it. Take the word of Coeur d'Alene's Chief of Police, Lee White, who said on Monday,
"Let me be very clear here. These were not law enforcement officers that we arrested. These were members of the hate group Patriot Front. These were not Antifa in disguise, nor were they FBI members in disguise."
But even that didn't stop that conspiracy theory from growing legs, kind of like a lizard, the FBI conspiracy theory. Moments later, there were several references to feds being in that van, including one by the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and another claiming the bullhorn being used by a Patriot Front member had an FBI sticker on it, so therefore they must be part of the FBI. Need any more proof? Patriot Front is FBI? Dog right girl asked. Real Patriot 9/11? Patriot Front equals FBI. But on closer examination, that sticker actually says, abolish the FBI. Can't always believe everything on the internet. So how does this happen? Well, we know how this happens. People with a platform decide to play with your emotions. So the better question is, why does stuff like this get legs, again, like a lizard, and get believed? It comes down to the basic fight or flight response we all have. Conspiracy theories have everything to do with human behavior and capitalizing on our fears. When fight or flight kicks in, our rational response goes out the window. Our adrenaline starts pumping, and we communicate it through our anger. All of that is according to Boise State Director of Counseling Services, who told us today they talk about this a lot in his field. That'd be Dr. Neese, and we wanted to talk with Dr. Matt Neese about this. He says anger is a secondary emotion. Anytime we're angry, we're actually afraid. And right now, everyone seems angry.
But anger is, unfortunately, a more acceptable emotion to express in our society today, especially here in Idaho, right? Anger, especially more than fear. And I think everything has to do with fear, conspiracy theories, polarization, because fear is such a powerful motivator.
And is that why people are so willing to just accept things that are very far from reality?
Not having information is super scary to us as humans. It makes us feel out of control, and even might trigger people with PTSD, because the withholding of information is actually an abuse tactic in abusive relationships. And so when we don't have answers or information, we quickly seek that out, and we'll take what is readily accessible. And we know how accessible things are now, right? Answers and the right information, obviously put that in air quotes. But also, generally speaking, we grab the information that seems to fit our existing value system and our worldview.
Is that confirmation bias that we hear a lot about?
100%, right? So confirmation bias is us seeking out information that supports our previously held beliefs.
Okay, so when this misinformation or even disinformation is proven incorrect, it's not that easily believed. It's not that easy to go, oh, okay, well now I know the truth.
Right.
Why is that?
Because we doubt the source, right? We've been told to doubt the source. And that's another thing that we think we really have to understand, is something that we are conceptualizing in the mental health field, is this idea that we are pack animals. We talk about fear. We hate to be alone. We are very afraid of being alone and being by ourselves. And nothing makes me feel like more of a pack or a group than to have a common enemy. And so instead of us uniting as a society to fight the common enemy of the pandemic or the virus, what we have instead been told is that it's their fault. Whoever they may be, it's now us and them.
Is there a way to break this cycle?
I think it starts with understanding it. Understanding that when I'm starting to feel activated, I stop and I say, okay, wait a minute, what am I afraid of? Instead of subscribing to this idea that it's them and it's this ulterior motive, that I instead stop and think, okay, what is all of the contextual information at hand here? And how do I want to perceive this? Not how am I being told to perceive it, or how are my friends perceiving it, or what's the cool way to perceive it? As much as we pride ourselves in being independent and feeling in control, we actually really want people to tell us what to do. And so pushing back on this idea that I got to use my own agency here to make an informed decision for myself, maybe my family. It makes sense. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Dr. Neese says these people that are perpetuating this misinformation, these conspiracy theories, they know what they're doing, and they're taking advantage of that, of our emotions. Well, has this stuff been getting worse lately, we asked him? He said yes. Things have become so polarized in recent years. We're inundated with bad news, and we're constantly told to be afraid. He says anger is our only emotion that needs a target. And it doesn't feel good to kind of sit with it. So we send it somewhere, anywhere. And right now, there seems to be a lot of marginalized targets out there receiving it.
Emmett's a community that's been hit hard by unemployment, but today their economy is getting a big boost by celebrating their most famous export, the cherry.
The community just looks forward to this all year long.
Emmett Mayor and Emmett native Bill Butici has been coming to the Cherry Festival ever since he was a kid.
She's missing front teeth, it's hard to eat it.
And while he calls it one of the great family-friendly events in the area,
I did it!
he also says it's more than that.
It's very lucrative, and this is one of our draws to help that business boost.
As Emmett looks for ways to battle their nearly 13% unemployment, getting around 40,000 people strolling through your town in 4 days sure helps.
Oh, I like the classic cars so far.
People like Doug Hardin.
I just came to check it out, heard about it from a friend of ours, and came to see what it's all about.
We invite people from all over to come. I even have people call from other states wanting to know when the Cherry Festival is so they can come.
Oh, yeah!
Mayor Butici also says this economic boost can extend far past just this weekend.
And of course, there's more to see at Emmett than just the Cherry Festival, and they like to walk around the town and see the other events that we have going on. So it's a big kick in that part, and that's one of the reasons we look forward to Cherry Festival every year.
Our hometown is really nice all the time, but it's a friendly town, and everybody comes in. They keep coming back because of the friendliness.
Hello! Hi!
At the Emmett Cherry Festival, I'm Justin Cora, Idaho's News Channel 7.
That was 11 years ago. Even the cherries say hello. Well, this year's Cherry Festival kicking off today, goes until Saturday. Want to hear more about this year's festival, what it's going to look like. So we asked Tina Heffley from the Gems County Chamber of Commerce. She says the theme for this year is follow the cherry brick road. Kind of a Wizard of Oz kind of theme, infused with cherries. And while everything at the Cherry Festival is all about representing the stone fruit, Heffley says there won't be much local supply because of the weather. In Emmett, much of the cherries aren't ripe yet because of the cooler weather. However, the cherries at the festival, they're still going to be from the area.
We have Gem Orchards, who's local, who grows early cherries, and they're called burlaps. And he kind of planted them specifically so we could have some cherries for Cherry Festival, because sometimes, they're just not ready. But it's easier to change the cherry up than it is to move the festival.
It's happened a few times, and there are a few changes this year as well to the festival. There's going to be one-way streets in some of those areas, so pay attention to that. There's also going to be a free shuttle. All right, just a few moments left in the show. Let's get right to your comments. Brian, reptilian theory. 13 million believe this theory. What is your source for this information? I find that hard to believe, as I've never heard of this theory. Well, my source, 2013, there was a poll that showed it about 12 million Americans, but a recent poll by The Ohio State University, they released a paper on the psychology of this stuff, and they said 4% of Americans, which is about 13 million Americans that believe this. Thanks for that excellent explanation on why people believe conspiracy theories. It helps understand fears the motivation, says Sheila. Lizard people don't wear ties. Just saying, says Rod.